Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are back for a space that normally was not supposed to happen until the month of November 2024, but we are going to push it further, and it is mostly led by the developments around Ubledar, but also the creeping collapse of the Kurakulo front. The current space was spurred by a remark. I'm going to put the remark onto the board right now. And unfortunately, that remark is the core problem of the OSINT on both sides, generally speaking, but especially on Western side. On a certain sense, I posted the remark, so it comes from the guys at Blackbird, John Helen. He has mostly meek remarks, not bad, not good, or not good, not terrible, let's say it like this, to paraphrase a TV show. But generally speaking, the main issue of these remarks is that they are not seeing what we are seeing at Timor criminal, but most importantly, they are not seeing in the future, they are not seeing in the past. So the experience of the past generally gets completely ignored. And Blackbird on that, to be honest, are not the worst. With the caveat of how pro-Ukrainian Western OSINT works, I will not insult the Blackbird group by putting it at the same level as Institute of bullshitting warfare, because right now, like, there is a level. Once again, this is not some kind of endorsement for Blackbird group. It's just like to say, guys, that even these guys who usually are supposed to be a little bit more grounded into reality are having huge issues. So let's go to the remark itself. Now, the remark, it says, so far the Russians haven't been able to turn tactical success into operational one, and so any large development here will likely emerge over the late autumn and winter. As Ukraine shift reinforcements into this sector, the Russians will ramp up pressure somewhere else, and then it goes on of the attrition, which is actually an exponential distribution, which is like, I've already explained this in 2022, 2023, 2024, but mostly it regards how two sets of different pools act together and give a completely different result despite what you can see. So the explanation is very simple, and it's the following. Let's say that you take turns and you withdraw from a pot on both sides a specific number of, balls, marbles, whatever. One pot has 100, the other pot has 20. And on each draw, each round, you're going to pull 10 from the pot with 100 and basically 3 from the pot with 20. And initially, you're going to put 3 from one pot and 10 from the other. These actually represent the losses that we see in Ukraine. So when we see the reports, you're going to see like a couple of losses for the Ukrainians, but a fuck ton of losses for the Russians. However, and this is one of the things I have already described, once you go back to the pots, you see that Southern Ukrainians are at 17 and the Russians are at 90. And it's true that when seen purely as losses, you're going to say, oh my God, fuck, the Russians are losing 3-4 times more. What the fuck is going on? And then you go another round. The other round suddenly sees the Russians at 80, Ukrainians at 14. Right? And then you're like, see, Ukrainians are not losing enough. It's only 6, but we have lost 20. And I'm like, yeah, unfortunately, this is what it is. Let's go another round. And the next round, Russians are at 70, Ukrainians are at 11. This is just the game, guys. This is just purely distribution. So suddenly you have the Russians standing there at 70 units, Ukrainians are at 11, and we have the feeling that, wait, what the fuck? Russians cannot go and keep losing that much assets and whatever. This is not normal. But this works only if you focus on the Russian losses. If you focus on the Russian losses, you're like, fuck, the Russians have lost 30, Ukrainians 9. This is not sustainable, man. Well, the matter of fact is that it is sustainable. Because then you do another draw. And from 11, you go to 8 on the Ukrainian side. And on the Russian side, from 70, you go to 60. And then suddenly, if you're not stupid, you start to go round by round. So, okay, right now we're at 4 rounds. Right? Cool. And one side has lost 12, the other has lost 40. It's a disaster for the Russian side. I mean, for fuck's sake, look at all those losses. But then you say, wait, if we are at the 4th round, but the side who has lost 40 has 60 and doesn't want to stop. Well, let's go. 5th round, and suddenly, Ukrainian side is at 5. Russians are at 50. And you're still like fucking 15 to 51. What the fuck, bro? Like, how can the Russians keep going like this? This is insane. They don't respect their fucking soldiers. They're losing so much shit. Well, the problem with that is that at the same time, the Ukrainians are at 5. And applied to the front line doesn't get smaller. The pressure that the Russians are putting on the front line keeps going at every single hyper-focus point. And the 50 is slowly overrunning the 5. And finally, we have, as it's happening right now in select areas of the front, the next row. And the next row is the 6. You pull another 3 on the Ukrainian pot, and you pull another 10 on the Russian pot. And suddenly, the Ukrainians have 2. Russians have 40. And what happens is that you got Solidovo lost in a matter of weeks. Despite troops going there, despite drones, despite tanks, despite more money going to Ukraine. And most importantly, Russians still have 40 in their pot. Which means that the next draw, which will be -1 for the Ukrainians and 30 for the Russians, would see the Russians completely unopposed. Of course, it's not that simple. It's just there to illustrate to people. But where John Helling and the guys at Blackbird Group are going with this is to actually tell the normies, the stupid idiots, the anti-pedos, the squirrels, the astrayas, the sheremetas, all these morons that for 3 years now have been sustaining and maintaining that Russia will go out of something. Guns, air, tanks, artillery. And they're right. At some point, Russians will be in deficit as well. But not before the Ukrainians. And this is the whole point of the attrition problem. However, this attrition doesn't explain another problem that we are seeing. And this is as Helen said, it's just purely tactical advances and operational shit. I disagree. I disagree because there is one thing that happened in Ukledar which makes the same thing that happened last year as a counter from the Ukrainian side impossible. Well, not impossible because impossible is nothing. Sorry, Adidas, you're going to close a lot of factories soon. But it will make it far more complicated, especially in the staging point. Now, what happened in Ukledar that suddenly we're having this discussion now? And what happened in Ukledar that I'm saying that John Helen is wrong when he said that operationally the Russians have yet to make a breakthrough? Well, it's pretty simple. I'm going to give you guys a small, quick look. So the situation in Ugledar last year was the following. Look at the extent of the front. This is the front during the counter. Look at the distance. During the counter, the front from Zaporozhye, so basically Kamensky, just next to Energodar, up to the Kurakovo area, but even beyond towards Avdiivka, was more or less continuous. So there was no abrupt cut on it. And the map I just posted, I don't know if you guys have it. I just put it. So the map I just posted represents October 2023. So if you can see the map there, you're going to see that the length on the south front up until Marinka in October 2023 was 230 kilometers. Let's say that's this. This front was contiguous. It was continuous. So basically, the Ukrainian could prepare a strike all over those 30 kilometers, and they'll also be able to spread their forces in order to stage attacks all over the front. So for the Russians, the kill box for every front would be 40, but that means that you will have specific assets for them. So basically, you will have an artillery unit, let's say a battalion, a reactive artillery unit, so basically MLRS, also a battalion, and you will make these boxes, and those boxes will be like 40 to 60 kilometers. And because of the 230 kilometers in length, you had like a huge concentration of artillery, and this, unfortunately for the Russians, played a very bad surprise to them, because this accumulation of forces led to them being targeted, because they made also some very stupid mistakes in Levadne, for instance. In Blagodatne, for instance, a whole battery of MSTA got splattered by HIMARS, and that led to the sudden collapse on the Blagodatne side within the Vermensky Lech, so coming from Velika Novosilka towards Staronivka, which was the culmination, was supposed to be the culmination of the advance within the first 10 days on that area. So, what is now the change? Why I'm suddenly speaking about something that on our first sight doesn't really change? Because what really has changed? Well, the front line there hasn't been shortened. Well, that's the thing. The front line has been cut. This is the current situation for the front. I would like you guys to have a small look. And look at the number, because the number is extremely, extremely interesting. It's a zoomed out map, so of course you're gonna go and check yourself. Go to Deep State. I'm using Deep State because right now they're not the most accurate. I mean, we can speak about how much things that are missing, but if Deep State says that, you mean that that's the minimum point, the minimum common denominator we're gonna have on the map. And right now, Deep State is the worst, actually, for the Ukrainian side when it comes. Not that they're giving the most advantage to the Russians, but those are the most outreach. So basically, you can be sure that you can oppose that into readership or lecture to pro-crops if you want to, entertain that insanity. I do it myself, so I'm not going to blame you guys. But basically, look at the numbers. And the numbers are, and it's funny, because this is one of the things that I had talked to you for so long. We are at less than 140 kilometers of continuous front. So basically, over 40% of the line from 2023 has been cut. And instead of that, right now, what we have is a small detail. and I'm posting it so you can understand, is a small detail that I'm going to call the Ugledar wall. And that small detail of the Ugledar wall that right now has risen about 12 kilometers from the previous front line makes it impossible, because it creates a rather large cauldron as it stands, but because the front is still active, it hasn't been fixed yet. I'm already portraying how it's going to look like at the end of this movement. If you want the exact advance of this Ugledar wall towards Kurakovo, it's going to be about 30 kilometers. So if you want to attack on the same line that you wanted before, there's a whole part of your front that has disappeared. Russians have come from the east towards the west, but also from the south towards the north. And the wall there makes it impossible for whoever to try and exploit Velika Novosibirsk. I've cut it in a line, which is the Suknyali River, which I think will be the operational division between the troops that are going to push from the Russian side, west to east, and south to north, and they're going to join themselves probably around Ivanovka on the Suknyali river, and they're going to advance, actually no, not at Ivanovka, that's beyond Uspenivka, but they're going to join to Ivanovka on the corner when the red line stops. That's on the Vovodcha river. And at that point, you would have something akin to this. So yeah, I added this would be the actual proper target, which would go from Vovodcha to the Samara bodies of water, and will be the actual limit from the Donetsk part, and encompass both, as I said, a contact line with the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, a contact line with the Zaporozhye Oblast, and a contact line with the Kharkov Oblast. Now, all this is in the future. We're not speaking about this. Well, we speak about what happened right now. And as I said, right now, the most important part is that the Ugledar wall that is already over 10 kilometers high, and it has the potential, or will, in my opinion, already be at over 25 kilometers high from Ugledar towards Uspenivka and beyond. Well, it simply compresses the potential counteroffensive on the Ukrainian side, and I already expressed this since last year, and I said this was the goal. The goal was to bring the front from east to west, and make sure that whatever the Ukrainians were attempting in Zaporozhye, because that's one of the things that we're going to speak about later. Zaporozhye, as it stands, hasn't changed that much. There are bits and bobs on the counter that have been erased, Rabotino, Pritunie, Levad, and so on. But generally speaking, the situation in Zaporozhye itself, it's still at 95 kilometers of depth everywhere. Some places maybe 100, 105, some places 90, but the danger is that if the Ukrainians are not stupid and suicidal enough, they will push there. They will create such a situation where, unfortunately, the Russians will have to reply completely differently as they did in Kursk or elsewhere. It will be a fight to the finish there. So, generally speaking, as I said, despite every single advance that we're seeing in Donetsk Oblast, and don't get me wrong, the situation is getting very bad for the Ukrainians everywhere, including in Zaporozhye. If we have to go for broke on the Ukrainian side, finally they haven't lost that much. The momentum is gone. Their troops are in the shit. Their recruitment is fucked up. The equipment they're gonna get is mostly a refill of what they lost in 2024, and not a replacement of the tragic losses in 2023. And generally speaking, what have been getting so far is not what they need, and themselves understand that. That's why their fourth generation, as I said, right now consists primarily, I'm going to repeat, primarily of IMVs or of MRAPs. And then armored vehicles of, limited offensive potential, as for instance the chunk of Humvees, probably M1151, so basically armored Humvees from the boat era. And this is the thing that most of the people are understanding. Ukraine is not getting quality replacements. And even when Paprika says, oh, you will give them 10 Lynxes, I'm like, for fuck's sake, what the fuck is even this? You're going to get 10 specific vehicles, which are already a nightmare to maintain for people in peacetime. You're going to give these things in wartime, in double-digit numbers, but low double-digit numbers. And there is not even enough for an actual full platoon or a company, call it as you wish. But to me personally, those 10 is going to be 2 platoons somewhere. But these are just like anecdotes. The main issue, and that's why I'm going to go back to Blackbird and generally speaking, is that operationally the Russians have managed to do exactly what they wanted. And what they wanted is that the next counter, it doesn't matter if it comes down south or up north, the next counter will have to go back and recover ground that those troops lost, that Ukrainian troops lost. And you know this already, I've explained it, is the Sisyphus myth, which is you roll the ball at some point and then the ball goes back and you need to restart all over again. And this is exactly what's going to happen to the Ukrainians. And we saw that with Kursk, which is once they're going to get to the offensive, with the current ecosystem in Ukraine, they are going to get slaughtered. And the fact that Kursk is backfiring so bad, especially as I said, Kursk was lightly equipped, lightly defended. Okay, there were fortifications, you had some minefields and stuff like that, but they had all the time to, recon Kursk, execute Kursk, and they ended up with less than, how much is it right now? 500 square kilometers, to be real, not the bullshit that they're trying to sell, especially with the most recent attempt at Veseloe. Actually, no, we put, because they didn't even go beyond the tree line there. This is exactly what Ukraine is now. Ukraine is a failed project, a military midget who, unfortunately for the Russians, stayed in round 1 and connected some very nasty punches. Kherson, battles around Kharkov, then the counteroffensives in Kharkov and Kherson. And then, he thought he could do that in round 2. Round 2 went shit. And all points indeed was Russians. And now we have round 3. And round 3 starts to be a little bit more on the technical chaos side. Ukraine has already gone to the ground 3 times, but unfortunately it's not KO yet. And now we're going to have round 4, 2025. And round 4, although both sides don't look that fresh anymore, round 4 is going to be just pure willpower. And of course, a lot of manpower. But what's happening at the end of round 3 right now, especially that we have still 2 months to go, is that Ukraine seems to completely lose areas where it should have been able to resist a lot better. I had a discussion with a pro-Russian guy yesterday who said that, yeah, well, Kursk was a, long-run bet. And I'm like, no. Kursk would have been a long-run bet if indeed both the troops allocated to Kursk, the equipment allocated to Kursk, but the advancement and the objectives allocated to Kursk would have been not only achieved, but clear enough. And we already had this discussion when it started, the very first day of the attack. Hodgepodge of units, all the units do a bit whatever they want, and when the overarching structure is there, the overarching structures apparently slows down everything because, they started to blow up the bridges on the same mid-August, but launched the exploitation of that shit a month later. The Russians have already started the counterattack, and that counterattack completely underscores all the failures from the first 2 weeks of the operation. I'd say the first fucking day, because as I said, they managed to cross Perenovo, didn't manage to hold that place, and didn't manage to, pour beyond Perenovo towards Rivs. And unfortunately, when it hurts is that, they managed to kill all these people in Oktyabrsky on the 12th of August 2024 with the HIMARS strike. But then, the Russians got their payback, and suddenly they got back in the game. And after the fact that they got back in the game, the things that started happening and we're seeing right now are textbook failure for the Ukrainian side. They started to lose the initiative. They started to lose the ability to move freely. I'm going to repeat to you guys because you need to understand this. They lost the ability to move unseen from week one. Some equipment that got captured, that got hit, that got eliminated, that got stopped, had moved in the most forward positions probably around the first, the second, or the third day. Suja, the way how they got Suja was also problematic because they had it on a fire control for 4 to 5 days. Some would say a week. I also think it was rather a week. But still, they didn't manage to clear out that city fast enough in order to bring up and start settling down. And in many aspects, that also shows what I said, that Ukraine's problems are not simply the manpower. Ukraine's problems are the whole gamut of the military apparatus, which is C2 is being completely dumbed down, and in a certain sense, I think it has to do with the Russians right now knowing where to hurt. The intermediate layers, so basically COs on between major and junior lieutenant, are not good enough. And the problem with that, and this is what I don't understand, either this has to do with the quick replacement, because we know that there are at least 4 to 4.5 thousand people have been killed or are missing in action on the Ukrainian side at the CO junior CO level, and the replacement for them, it looks in a certain sense, especially given some information that I got to the group, that it afflicts in the same way the Russians. Troops growth is there in a certain sense, but the people to lead them are not there. So what happens is that most of the people who rather start having the commanding posts either are promoted, either are parachuted there, but in a certain sense they either learn on the job by basically doing the whole monkey sees, the monkey does, which isn't there, to be a proper training. If your junior lieutenant is copying some NCO, some staff sergeant who, was doing that with the previous commander, who knew this shit, but, you are not evolving. What you're doing is that you're taking over the tasks of another guy, but that other guy was doing certain tasks based on the realities of the ground. You parachute this new guy who starts copying what was done before, but has no view on how the attrition and amortization of his unit is going on. And when he starts understanding, well, you had the situation that you had with a couple of territorial units, when one lieutenant colonel shot himself, some other guys refused to mount on the attack, pulled back early, left a whole flank open, and the Russians just benefited from it. And once again, similar issues happen with the Russians as well. Don't don't think that this isn't, affecting the Russians. The problem with them, there's just more of them, and also they got the trend, they got the momentum behind them. And this is something that covered actually the Ukrainian mistakes in 2022. They had the momentum, they had the advances, and the exhilaration coming from the victories of 2022 masked that some decisions were stupid. The fact, as I said, that in Kharkov in 2022, they didn't choose to pause and see where they're going to hit next. They kept going and pursuing the Russians towards Luhansk. But that meant themselves were going to be stretched out, because until September 2022, all the ground, the ground from more or less Izium towards Kupiansk, all that ground was Russian. So the logistics that were supposed to follow there never made it in one time. They started getting locked down. The Russians started to resist a little bit. Mobics came in. And suddenly you got your whole attack swamped. Your attrition starts mounting. And what was up to there a triumphant march towards Lugansk turns into a quagmire, turns into exactly what the Russians wanted, which is an attrition. You get stalled while the Russians are moving towards Bakhmut. And other mistakes, as I said, is that they were not able to push as fast as possible in Kherson and isolate and capture a large number of Russians, despite the quote-unquote shameful retreat from Kherson beyond the Dnieper. The Russians managed to pull most of their assets, most of their troops. And we're not going to be completely blind to the mistake and to the failures, since the failure to capture was in a sense and Nikolaev. But the reality is that the Russians lived to fight another day. And that other day, well, happened in Zaporozhye next year, where the Ukrainians once again continued the same mistakes in 2022. So all this is to say that the problem with Ukrainians right now is really a small ecosystem of everything that's not working within the Ukrainian polity. The Ukrainian political entity as it stands has major problems. The leadership is mired right now into trying to cover its mistakes, not solve them. Zelensky is still going with his idea that they're going to go back to the 1991 borders. Zelensky is still going with his idea that NATO needs to fucking jump into Ukraine, send troops to fight the Russians in Ukraine, give them assets that NATO itself doesn't want to give them because they will need them for later, and start striking Russia and basically provoking casus belli. Despite the fact that NATO itself from the beginning has tried to tell everybody they will not be part of a war. This, of course, is bullshit. They are part of this war, but what they say is they don't want to have the fight escalate with Russia and NATO start to lob shit at each other completely beyond the ground in Ukraine. And the fact that Zelensky insists on something that, in my opinion, will not happen within 2025 unless the situation gets out of hand, and as I said, the Russians pull towards Dnipropetrovsk, we have here a huge problem on the Ukrainian side. Because as I said, they cannot have an election. Zelensky, after 3 years, hasn't made a kind of national unity government, which, in my opinion, would play in the hands of the Russians. On that, I think he's mostly right. Because try and put Poroshenko and all the fucking loonies, except Zelensky in there, and you're going to have a complete cacophonia of, elements, and within 6 months to a year, you're going to have a South Vietnam situation when Zelensky is going to get hanged or you're going to have an accident, and the whole fucking country is going to start having a chaos situation where the Russians are going to crush them. Not as much on the field, but just mentally, which would be a very funny, karma regarding what Budanov said last year, which was that Ukraine had liberated Crimea psychologically. Like Budanov shit. But now let's go back to the problem with your centers. All these people are not seeing how threatening the situation in Ugledar is. And this is not about Kurakova, this is not about, Glock, this is not about MSR, all this bullshit. Let's say it plainly, this is about Russia now having curtailed a lot of operations in Zaporozhye, and that means that the diversion situation that could happen towards Donetsk doesn't exist anymore, or will be extremely difficult for Ukrainians to do. On top of it, the staging point and the distribution routes that Ukrainians may have for their supplies now are getting more and more concentrated into the double highway belt from basically west of Kurakovo towards Kamyanske. So it's this double belt of highways with large distribution roads, which is going to start and accumulate Ukrainian forces and is going to, well, basically attract Russian glided bombs. So operationally, the guys from Blackbird Group are completely wrong. Operationally, Russia has finally managed to do exactly what it should have done in 2022, which is shorten its own front in defense. By creating this literally 45-degree, 9-degree salient, 45 in areas, 9-degree when it comes to the Ugledar wall, going towards Kurakovo, the Russians have managed to solve one core problem they had since the beginning of this war. And that is make sure that Ukrainians are not going to try to go towards Donetsk. It's not a buffer situation. We said that in September 2023 that absolutely there needs to be a buffer. You got a political problem here where after a whole year and some a year and a half of war, Ukrainians still can rain ammunition in Donetsk downtown, and that's unacceptable. And of course, it had a lot to do with the fact that the Russians were too busy going after political goals in nature without the military assets to do them. And too many goals, too bigger goals, not enough assets, and you're going to fail. And in 2022, fast forward, the Ukrainians doing the same, going in Kursk. We had Krinky was hilarious. We had these attempts to sway the Russians in March during the election with the attempt towards Belgorod. And then we had the bombing campaign towards Belgorod. Then we have, of course, as I said, Kursk. But generally speaking, what the Ukrainians try to do all 2024 is just have this kind of dry run of offensive runs in the worst place possible, with the worst results possible. But most importantly, they did so, and I said that last time, half-assed. 50% of all these plans resided in Russia's panicking, and the other 50% resided on basically the West going along and saying, you know what, we're going to fucking defend you, or have, I don't know, a no-fly zone, or some kind of covert intervention. Or, in case of Belgorod, in case of Kursk, allow them to use longer-range missiles to stop Russians from attacking Ukraine. But in this case was just to have a semi-strategic strike campaign up to 300 kilometers within Russia, which still, in the mind of Zelensky, is what needs to be done to stop the attacks in the east. But the problem is that as we are seeing with their own drones and their own attacks, which are far more numerous that they can receive from the West, because I saw two numbers a week ago on some drones, and the Ukrainians have probably launched somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 drones as the minimum in 2024 towards Russia. Which, when I saw the one Geran, and I actually posted, which was at 12,000, you can completely understand that actually, when it comes to long strike range drones, both sides are at the same level. Ukraine's at 3,000, Russia's probably at 4.5 to 5,000. So proportionally, they are doing the same shit. And one of the things that the Ukrainians are doing well is they are going for high-profile shit. Whereas the Russians are doing stuff, causing damage, but once again, of course, the PR game is against them because the Westerns are not going to start running to publish satellite images. But at the same time, the mindset on the Russian side is not to start, blowing some kind of depot. No, they're going to use the Geraniums. They're going to, especially the latest strike with a EO-equipped Geranium, they're going to hurt the Ukrainians in a cumulative way. So we're going to clear up Sumy, and that, if you are a long-time member of the audience, you will know, as I said, the thing for the Russians to do the Ukrainians is to actually enforce a buffer zone, not by occupying those areas, but making life there very, very difficult or quasi-impossible. And that's what the Russians are doing, most of it. And one of the things that we're hearing from the Ukrainian side is that the glide bombs are hitting between 60, 70 kilometers worth of depth, which is that they are not blowing shit in Pavlograd, they are not blowing shit in Uman, but they're making it impossible for Ukrainians to have a proper last mile supply line. They are also making it almost impossible for Ukrainians to bring enough reserves close enough to reply to any kind of situation. Because the moment more than 3 or 4 companies are dispatched to a certain patch of land, they're going to get UNPK. And as I said, it doesn't matter if one UNPK kills one guy and one wounds 2. The Russians have dropped over 25,000 so far. Probably between, as I said in the group, between 24 and 27. And it seems like the year is going to end at 33 to 36,000. And all you need with those UNPK is to kill one and wound 2. Just fucking do the math. You're going to have over 100,000 casualties just by some guy, lighting a cigarette, flying his Su-34, going at 50, 60 kilometers from the line of contact, dropping that shit, going back to have another cigarette. And then also complaining that he hasn't been paid extra for blowing shit up in Kursk and literally making, laying waste on Ukrainian troops there. This is the hilarity of this whole game. And because of the losses that Ukrainian aviation has had cumulatively in these 3 years, the aircrafts that are going to come to the Ukrainian side, the only thing they can hope to do with is, as I said, is try to get close to what the Russians are dishing on them in terms of damage. But trying to hunt down Su-34s with F-16s, I wouldn't try that. And the reality is that it hasn't happened yet, mostly because of, once again, the capability that has been given to Ukrainians, which in this case is an extra punch for the air defense, but that air defense is mainly against deep strikes on the Russian Federation, not to go toe-to-toe with Russia's aircraft. And that's the biggest problem. And this is not particularly due to the fact that the planes that they have gotten, or the assets generally, when we speak of artillery, when we speak of AD, when we speak of ammunition equipment, it has nothing to do with the fact that these things are intrinsically bad. It has to do that they are given too late, not in good enough condition, not in large enough quantities, and without any other ecosystem. So one of the things that we have discussed back 6-7 months ago were the Swedish early warning aircraft. Nobody's speaking about them. They were supposed to have 2 of them. And not only are they not flying in Ukraine, where they should be flying, but they are not helping the Ukrainians either. I'm sure that NATO in Romania, especially when it comes to Odessa, and in the Black Sea, are getting the shit done for Ukraine, but not those planes that were supposed to be basically available to the Ukrainian Air Force. And given the size of that ship, the Ukrainian Air Force, and it's the same thing for the corvettes that Turkey is building, in my opinion, doesn't know what to do with them. Because they don't fit most of the hardened shelters that Ukrainians have. And most importantly, on top of the fact that they don't fit these hardened shelters, they need a very specific footprint. They have a larger consumption and larger reservoir than anything else. They can stay on the air a lot more, and that means a larger pattern. One of the things that Ukrainians love doing with their aircraft, especially the MiG-29, is take off, fly low, stay away from Russian radars, pop up 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 meters, drop the ordnance they want, harm GBU-39, so small diameter bomb, hammer, whatever they have, and then go the fuck back. But with an aircraft like those Stabs, you need to stay high enough in order to have both the capability to, survey the area that you're attached to, but also that means that you yourself are visible to Russian detection. And because you're going to stay in the air so long and so high, Russians are going to know exactly where you're going, how you're going to fly. On top of it, there are specifics on those planes that, they would need a length of a runway, which is going to be different from the 650, 850 meters that you need to have as a minimum for the MiG-29. And this is the beauty of this shit. This is the beauty of autism in a certain sense. So Ukraine right now finds itself in such a shitty situation because of, as I said, multiple problems. But this is even more compounded by the fact that even quote-unquote good OSINT or realistic OSINT is not trying to go too far. A lot of people, if you focused on a lot of things that you're going to hear from most of OSINT or, self-proclaimed OSINT, they are going to tell you all the bad things about Russia. You're going to have people who are going to start stacking up bad news about Russian economy. And I'm like, yeah, fine, cool. At the same time, they're not going to start talking about the bad shit going in Ukraine. And don't forget, the problem is not when it comes to the economic side of the coin. The problem is not that Russia needs to break down. The Russians can fucking eat grass and kill every single motherfucker in 404. When it will come to that, I'm telling you as it is, Russia will have inertia even if the economic situation goes to shit for at least 2 more years. But the economic situation, while, as I said, is going to have to cool down, it's not going to crash anywhere as bad as the Ukrainian economy has already crashed. So in a sense, most of these type of OSINTers, they have long forgone the conclusion that Ukraine as it stands is fucked. And that is what they should be saying. But they don't, of course not. The whole point is to, just aggravate pro-Russian people like basically me. There is one particular idiot, a stupid bitch, that keeps talking about stuff that she doesn't understand when it comes to railroad, because to economy, to every all of those things. She forgets that all those stuff, all that shit is not in a vacuum. And all that stuff is working in and out in direct relationship with the war that's going on. And the bigger problem when you see this is that you start to ask yourself, am I stupid? Are we at team were criminal, retarded, that we are not seeing this? No, this is one of the things you need to understand in the group. And we have a couple of doomers in the group. One of the problems we have is seeing where it hurts the Russians. And mostly it's tactical, let's be honest. But by doing so, by doing some kind of autocriticism, self-reflection, we can also completely change our views when things happening. And that's what happened with Kursk. When first we said that we're criminal, this is bullshit. This is the absolute disaster for them. And right now they're funny, they're happy, but it's, the ant and the cigarra. What did you do all summer? Well, I sang. And then the ant says to the cigarra, well, you can dance now. So it's the same thing. The problem with the Austin community, especially the anti-Russian one, Blackbird Group, for instance, or other guys, of course they are anti-Russian because that's how it works. It's West against East. So we are not going to start and try to, invent shit that isn't there. But those guys were the first to be alarmed right away. I mean, like I posted when it was the former account. They understood as well, oh, this is a fucking gamble. Of course, as I said, they were limited to what they could say. I mean, I'm going to tell you guys, in private, those guys looked at that, and I'm 100% sure they said, oh, this shit is going to be fucking bad. And that has been their line. And once again, this is not an endorsement. Quite the contrary. They've said so much shit, so much stupid stuff. And they have held a certain line that I personally, if you're ethical and you respect yourself, you cannot say that. Started to see, stuff stacking up. But those people at least have some kind of, maybe not conscious, but they can see that, okay, this shit is going bad. And then we have our own side using their tools. And thank you, Elmo, for the animation from Deep State. And my Serbian friend literally said, you can literally see when Kursk starts, shit goes downhill from Ukrainians. In Pokrovsk and also down south in Ugledar. We have still, people that are out there selling, and I'm not speaking about the people like David and shit like that. I'm speaking about people who right now are being used as analytical sources. Def Mongol, Andy the Pedo, all the retards from the jail confirmed team. All these people, when they try their hand and guesstimating, describing, this is exactly where I am. Sometimes I'm blowing, and then I hear people from my own crew trying to have arguments over this and that, or about numbers. And I'm like, bro, this is so beneath everything I need to check in order to see how things are going. And yet, for fuck's sake, when I have videos every single day from 20, 30, 40 Mobic units where the order is given to advance, and the local commander is going to be a complete and utter asshole who probably deserves the rope, sending these guys forward. And the Mobic at his own level, he's going to see only suffering, pain, and bullshit. And cynically, that's why he's there. And this is on both sides. I'm not going to have some kind of, nonsense. I'm not going to start defending some Russian decisions. But those decisions, just like from the beginning of this war, were cynically aimed at a rapport of force, of a ratio, which you and me in the civilian life, with all the bullshit that circulates among Western militaries, just cannot accept, because what transpires from all of this nonsense, all the fake Hollywood militarism on both sides of the Atlantic, is that the life of the soldier is the best thing ever. No, bitch, no. You are into a peer competition or a near peer one. You are going against guys who will fucking eradicate you. And in a certain sense, all the FPV videos on the Ukrainian side is exactly that, is the fact that Ukrainians know they're overmatched. And those FPVs are a kind of force equalizer. And in a certain sense, they consider Russians are meat because the Russians consider themselves as meat. And we have had this discussion. FPVs against UMPKs. HIMARS against Iskander or Uragan or Smerch. This is the actual real nature of this war. And it's not, the wanton destruction, the cruelty. No, it's numbers. It's numbers, it's strength, is ways how to overthink the other guy, outthinking, outflanking. And, a lot of people mocked me on the other side. When in October I said, well, unfortunately maybe the losses are not palatable for many, but for the Russians they are, because the goal was to dislodge the Ukrainians from the heights. Would I have done the same thing? Probably not, but that's the problem. I'm not there. I'm not the commanding officer. And I know probably next to zero of the real environment. I'm not saying not to doubt the Russian leadership or even Ukrainian, because it's the same, it would be the same logic. I'm saying that a lot of the things that we're seeing on both sides are part of their PR. Russians were extremely bad at that. Ukrainians were extremely good at that. Then suddenly it has changed all over 2024, despite all the gore, despite all the critical images that we're seeing. There is only one leitmotif: Russia going forward. Russia вперед. And that's it. I'm not saying it's gonna stay like this, but if it's going like this, and the Russian leadership is convinced from this method of going forward, while also having show trials about graft, corruption, and theft that they knew was there for over 11 years, then there is a balance, there is a method to this madness for them. And once again, this doesn't mean that we should not doubt what they're doing, but we should also start thinking beyond what exactly John Helling in his post has said. There is no oppression. No, bro, no. Look at where things were 2 years ago, 1 year ago, today. Look also at what scares the Russians the most. Look also to what would also be the political solution if we get to that point. And as I said, the political solution for the Russians is to put the Russian military in such a place where the Ukrainians will have a dilemma, not on what to give out of what the Russians have as territory, but where to avoid yapping because it's gonna get worse. And Zelensky with Kursk, in a certain sense, he admitted that. As I said, he started Kursk because in his mind was, if we put our shit in Donetsk, they're gonna waste it. But at the same time, you cannot claim you want to go for attrition and then start burning your troops by both ends. That's stupid. That's either you're high, either you are lying. And in a certain sense, that gambit could have been interpreted by a lot of people in Russia like, this motherfucker is, wasting a lot of his troops, he must have a plan, or there must be some kind of green light behind. But as we're seeing right now, especially from the American leadership, and of course the election is there, so maybe that's why we're not seeing more drastic steps taken by the Americans. The Kursk situation itself seems to have been an attempt, as I said, to put the Americans in front of a fait accompli. And please, guys, we're there right now. You need to help us keep this and force Russians to the table. The problem, as I said once again, is that the Kursk invasion filled up every single checkbox on the Russian side to nuke and absolutely lay waste into Ukraine. And on that, it's going to be extremely complicated to start claiming Article 51 of the UN General Charter. When Zelensky said, we're going to hold this territory, I'm going to tell you once again, a military action in order to defend yourself within the land of your attacker has no problem. You know, like, you can counterattack where you want. But if your intention is to actually occupy that land, you are getting out of that legal loophole. And people are going to say, no, but it's not occupation, it's the same buffer zone that the Russians are. No, what Zelensky said, and he said, we don't need the land, but we're going to hold the land indefinitely. There you have it. And he didn't say that like something like this. He had a huge interview with the Western press, being like, yeah, everything's fine, but we're taking Kursk. Then you had all the bullshit, the trolling with the Kursk Popular Republic, all this shit. It's fine. I mean, that part, Russian deserved it for, you know, failing to stop the invasion right away. But, because that's the funny part, there is always a but with the Ukrainians. There is always a but with the Russians as well. Leading 1-0 at halftime is not winning the match. And that's exactly what's going on with the Ukrainians right now. They had their shot, they blew it, and now it's the Russians who are blowing them up. I'm going to repeat once again, I'm not hearing any Osint on any part going at it and saying Kursk was a mistake, Ugledar is a disaster. Even their own fucking Voenkorps, they call me Sniper, Muncho Jugend, all these assholes, Donbassky Demon, all these assholes, no, it's Bachmus Demon, whatever. All these assholes, they don't understand the main problem with this. They are trying to focus and narrow the view of most of these people down to, we are destroying the Russians, we are damaging them, the Russians are not advancing. And at the same time, after that, they comes with, oh, well, fuck, the Russians are just taking 30, 40, 50 square kilometers. How can that be possible? As I said, it's extremely possible. Go back to what I said initially with the two pots and draws. You can make the Russians draw 7 times 10 beats, and the Ukrainians 7 times 3 beats. But if the pots are smaller for one side and bigger for the other, as I said, 20 and 100, there is so much you can do. That's why I repeat, and I said once again, what Ukraine needs right now is to get away from the attrition logic. Ukraine either needs to be smart and live to fight another day, and I'm not speaking capitulation, or needs to get its priorities in order and enable a counterattack on Zaporozhye. The conditions right now are not there. Of course they're not there. They're getting their asses handed, and they haven't done anything to, curbstone the Russian aviation. The Su-34 right now is not only the king of battle, but it's literally the only thing The only thing the Ukrainians just cannot hit in the sky. And that's it. On top of it, one of the things that they have as a huge problem on the Ukrainian side is a deficit of theater aircraft defenses. So one of the things I need for you guys to understand, if shit goes down badly in Kurakovo and you have another cauldron, think about what's going on in Kursk. In Kursk, now that the Ukrainians are depleted on the AD and that they are locked into specific kill zones, Russians are sending their UCAVs. And yes, they lost two. One that crashed in Taganrog, one that was hit. Fine, happens, but that's the whole point of UCAV. That is the whole point of it. But those two have been dishing a headache to Ukrainians, and based on the images, they have been hitting tanks in a very disproportionate way. I counted 9. Plus other vehicles, plus PVD, so basically bunker points, stuff like that, plus artillery, plus AD, claimed, of course. So once you put everything together, as I said, it doesn't matter if you're going to lose 1 Orion after 10 strikes. That's the whole point. The point is not to lose your pilot, the point is not to lose your plane, but be precise enough. Imagine that now in a pocket west of Kurakovo, created because you have these bodies of water behind Kurakovo. This acceleration of the parity of both sides has also to do with the fact that Ukraine is smaller. And that is something that a lot of post-inters have said. It's a smaller population, so of course some things are going to be worse for the Ukrainians. But at the same time, the same post-inters are going to revel into gore, into Russian losses. And I'm going to repeat, as I said, while forgetting that the attrition doesn't apply the same way. So what everybody is saying, like, yeah, Russians lost, I don't know, 115,000, 120,000, or even 200,000, as was claimed at some point, and the Ukrainians lost only 85,000. Well, as I said, you have to start doing the proportions there. And you start to understand that first, maybe, those estimates are not very truthful, but secondly, they are not impacting the Russians the way they should be impacting them. Because proportionally, it's worse for Ukraine. And as I said, when you arrive to a tipping point, when the available manpower for the smaller side is not able to resist on the T-line to the bigger side, then there is a rout. There is the scenes that we saw in Selidovo. There are the scenes that we saw from Novoyanovka. There are the scenes that we saw from Ugledar. There are the scenes that we saw from Prisistivka. There are the scenes that we're going to see, in my opinion, for the next 4 to 6 months. And then we have, of course, some other problems for the Ukrainians that Austin ignores. And it's normal that it is being ignored. Because starting to speak those things. So, for instance, what they say that the attacks on the Ukrainian energy sector are, dangerous because they're going to leave people without heating or electricity by the winter. And I'm like, but that's not the problem. The real problem is, as I said, and actually it's not me, it's 2 guys within the crew. They're going to hit the productive side of Ukraine. So basically people who make shit that you can sell and get the money without begging. Also, given one of the latest next post, I know that Ukrainians are engaged in lying. Snake posted an article from a Ukrainian special metal manufacturer who said that in September they had given rebars and shit to the Pokrovsk mine in order to expand the basically exploitation of the mine. Well, we know that's a lie, because in order to do that, you will have to ship all that stuff via rail. And we know by the locals, but also by the stupid Ukrainian foreign course, that there is no rail connection since the end of August there. Of course, it is possible you have the trucks, but as I said, you would need a long line of stuff to move in, and basically the Russians are going to hit that shit as well. Plus, we have this alleged attempt from Akhmetov to ask Putin to spare his bit of empire from Pokrovsk to Dobropila and beyond. So once again, the problem with Ostend in this war is that most of them are engaged in being anti-Russian. And I don't expect them to be truthful. You need to understand this. I don't care if they start lying about Russia. I mean, the latest North Korean tales are the best. Blocking troops, execution squads, some dude, getting stopped and inventing a whole bullshit about interceptions. Like, I get it. It's part of the whole psyop game. It's part of the PR game. The problem is they are given to normies, and apparently for some reason, the logic behind this is that the decision makers are getting this shit. I mean, we have Landsbergis, and of course they're going to use the whole Korean shit show to try and push for interventions. The Baltic Chihuahuas are going to do this. But my problem is that you are still selling that stuff as your public discourse, which is like we're reverting back to anthrax, we're reverting back to aluminum tubes, we're reverting back to incubators, we're reverting back to Viagra containers. And that's the problem. Of course, people are going to say, but of course they're hypocrites and they are liars. I mean, look at what Israel is allowed to be doing. And yes, I get it. The point is not Israel. Israel is something much of a sacred cow, which the West is not going to fucking slay. But the rest of it is getting ridiculous. Like right now, these informations, let's call them like this, are actually undermining their own position. And of course, you're going to say, but what does it even fucking matter that they undermine the position or not? It's going to be the same bullshit. It's going to be the exact same bullshit. Like, okay, maybe you're going to have some fringe group like the Sarah Wagenknecht in Germany, but most of the guys who are going to take over have been completely returned. If Marine Le Pen takes over in France, I do not expect her to stop any kind of aid, mostly because it's making money somehow for the French economy as well. So the whole war investment phase is going to keep this discourse afloat, but the problem when it's going to come down to who's going to win this war, who's winning right now, but who's going to win it down the road. That's going to lead to people asking questions. And once again, I'm not stupid. I'm not saying that you're going to have a revolution because you lied about North Korean idiots and you lost the war in Ukraine. No, what I'm saying is that the damage within the internal discourse is going to be there. So in certain sense, they are going to get tied to their own lies. And the only point to avoid that, in a certain sense, is to go deeper with those lies. And in a certain sense, I'm going to tell you as it is. I really want them to make that stupid mistake and intervene in such a way that they're going to still be not enough to do anything serious, but they're going to start incur losses. I perfectly can see retards like the Poles or Macron doing some stupid shit and sending a peacekeeping brigade or whatever, and losing, as I said, once one or two companies because, penis Iskander never comes looped, and the matryoshka of consequences is hard wood. And then we would have the same, as I said, the same wake-up call for everyone, because it would be, fuck, we're at war, what we do now? And I think that the West is under-equipped for that. The only part in the West who is well-equipped enough is America, because most of the wars they fought were against nobodies. But imagine your Macron or your Merz or whoever telling your guys, we're going to fight against Russia because we made a mistake. That's what you need to understand. The awesome curse so far, and the view generally that Ukraine has been selling, and this actually was the bottom line of this space, is leading us towards an inevitable conclusion, which has two possibilities. Is letting Ukraine go. The West says that we're not going to do that, but they're going to let them go. And letting them go, it doesn't mean like Russia's going to occupy the whole of Ukraine, but they're going to force Ukraine to take a deal, which would be bad for everyone, let's say honestly, but extremely bad for Ukraine. And then you got the other opposite situation, where they're going to double down following the Chihuahuas with a major loss of life. And that's what this thing is. And nukes and all that stuff is completely in the background. The reality is that at some point, as they quote-unquote called Russia's bluff with the long-range weapons used in Crimea, also in territory of Russia in Belgorod, Russia is going to call their bluff once they are in Ukraine. And we're going to go from sleepwalking to a war into, having Europeans humiliated, whoever's going to do that, to the point where America will be the adult in the room with horrible consequences for everyone. But as I said, imagine a stupid Polish adventure or, some French stupidity getting wasted. And there is nothing there in between. Either the French are going to hit back Moscow or St. Petersburg or whatever, and then, you're going to have an escalation, or they're going to go back with their tails between the legs. And this is something that the hardcore Seekers wanted since 2022, which was hit their planes to the Black Sea. But they starting to ignore the problem here. The problem is that those going to be NATO or French or American, whatever troops in Ukraine. So part of the war. Despite what everybody said about, if we're there as trainers, we're not part of the fucking battle. No, it doesn't work like that. You're a co-belligerent because you're fulfilling a fucking support role. And once again, I'm going to say exactly what stands in the U.S. Law of Warfare, Manual Law of Warfare, which is any single asset that is helping to fight, sustain, or generate a force for the combat is a target. You don't have any legal protection once you are in Ukraine and you're supporting their army. So on that sense, as I said, it's in or out. And I said either Ukraine is, pushed to admit something that they should not be admitting. I'm not going to lie to you. Ukraine should not be forced to sign a peace deal. Of course, there's a nuance because we're Team THD. But at the same time, the only way to help Ukraine not sign that thing would be killing European troops. And all this boils down to selling bullshit to people, selling bullshit to the public, where Ukraine was slaying its queen for 2+ years, and then suddenly you have, as we have spoken, full zrada from around end of 2023 or early 2024, and that full zrada is not even fucking half truthful, because it was always sprinkled but the Russians lose 10 times more. Doesn't work like that. But let's finish it right now and have the core logic here. As I said, one of the biggest problems we're going to have right now, the last 2 months that we're seeing, is if the Ukrainian armed forces, I hope they do, but also some of the most, non-stupid Ossinters start recognizing that the pattern of war is not going towards Ukraine losing the war as it stands, because that's more or less a given, but that Ukraine is making huge mistakes that will contribute to the loss of not only Donetsk, but also a aggregate serial of reasons that would start collapsing the front way beyond Zaporozhye and Donetsk Oblast. And of course, we spoke about this, and I said that this is probably where Monkey wants to go after Kursk. I think that Monkey was stupid enough, or at least in a certain sense, was ready to consider the whole, we're not going to strike your energy grid and you're not going to strike our refineries. And then, of course, the coke addict would do what it does always, which is try to fuck people. And then you have Kursk, and then Monkey says, no deal. So, the point here, I'm going to repeat, and I know that a lot of people are going to say, yeah, but Ukraine is defending itself, so they have to do whatever they want, because, I say it all the time, all is fair in love and war. But you cannot have that discourse if you are, messing around with a guy who can end you. On the legal part, of course, Russia is the quote-unquote aggressor here, but you're trying to have a deal not to get killed to the last one. And at the same time, you are using that deal to cheat on them. And once again, in a certain sense, this is like trying to cheat on the mafia. Nobody's going to say that mafia are nice guys, but trying to cheat on them means that you're stupid, because they're going to find you. And of course, it is that problem. Of course, is that you are accepting to eat shit. So your whole point is to, eat the least shit possible. And you're going to do Kursk. But that would, as I said, that would mean that a lot of people who are pushing a lot of narratives, and it's not about Twitter, just go and check Reisner. Reisner, that dude, up to a certain point, was neutral / slightly pro-Ukraine. And then after the counter, he went full fucking house pro-Ukraine by saying, oh, we have to tell the Ukrainians, either we, start, giving whatever they want, or we need to tell them it's lost. No. You're not forced to do that. You have a certain other solution, which is go to war. But by not going to war for Ukraine, what you're doing is basically messing with them. And in a certain sense, it's completely normal that Ukrainians are going to fucking try and find innovative manners to get you involved. Because Kursk is, in my opinion, it's just that. It's fait accompli. You need to bail us out because we're going to get fucked. But the problem is also that the tone needs to change. The hyperbole, and of course, I mean, the cohort of stupid people like Justin J. Smart, all the bitches that they're using to boost stupid messages, the Goncharenko types, all those guys need to go. All those people who sold shit to the Ukrainian, but also to the non-Ukrainian population for 3 years now, those guys need to get completely wiped. But you cannot do that while having Zelensky. Because the whole strategy beyond warfare was that. The whole strategy was to completely vilify, turn Russia into, well, orcs, and hide the real problem, which, if you read a couple of articles that are popping out here and there, Adam Two's one, such an article. There's another one from Richard Kemp. So once you start pointing all this shit out, and of course there is a lot of zrada, there is a lot of agitation and panic there, you have to, break this balance of all bad, all good, and stop mythifying something that is pretty fucking normal. Just don't deal with Ukraine. Those guys could have been fairly neutral. Didn't even matter to be in the Russian sphere of influence. First of all, that unfortunately was historically true. But second of all, that it's pretty simple for Ukrainians to, go to a country where they spoke the language, where up until 2003 or 4, Ukrainians were not really a problem. They were the same thieves on the same fucking band. It was cool. Like, half the shit that went out of both military budgets was stolen between UVZ and Kharkiv Morozov. A lot of shitty projects that you had left and right, they were like stealing from each other. They were literally two peas on the pod. And suddenly, Ukraine becomes this fucking paragon of democracy, but nobody tries to explain why the fuck Ukraine is going down on every fucking single indicator. It cannot be just Russia, right? This is the fucking narrative that needs to change. And it starts with, try to also see what the Russians are seeing. And I would start to agree with the fact that, of course, if you see what the Russians are seeing, you're not going to fucking tell everybody, oh, you know what, you're fucked, guys. In 4 to 6 months, well, you better make a peace deal or they're going to fuck you even harder. I kind of understand that, but there are ways to say it, like, when we gained the counter last year, in March, well, I had a expletive-laden thread about how bad some of the fortifications were and how bad the general approach to it was. And I'm not going to say that the Russians heard me, but I think they heard all the people who made this straight to their faces, not through Twitter, and they managed to solve most of them. Plus, on top of it, there was also the fact that Ukrainians clearly were not experienced enough to, exploit the weaknesses of the early Surovikin line system. And it ended with, as I said, in March 2023, the absolute carnage in Novodanilovka, and which should have, told everybody that the counter was a very fucking bad idea. But everybody was busy by trying to hold a Bakhmut, and they didn't pay attention to the actual reality of the things, which is that unfortunately the Ukrainians were going for broke. Now, to wrap up all this stuff, why I'm asking for not transparency, but at least some more realism on the Ukrainian side, is that there is no preparation for what's coming for them. Because their marathon is bullshit, and their Cassandras are the complete opposite. They are selling a world of pain and some kind of genocide that the Russians will not do. Actually, that's the funny thing. what the Russians want from Ukraine, if they are able to conquer it wholly, is to fucking put that place back in feet, back in shape. Because first of all, it's their, glacis towards the west, but most importantly, they would gain, and it has to be said, quite an amount of natural resources and land, of course, which would help advance the Russian, I'm not speaking about economy, but the Russian people and Russian nation as a whole. The THD is becoming a necessity, but the reality for the Russians, when you think it purely on the conquest terms, is to have the least possible of these people leave Ukraine and get killed for it. There is this saying that the whole point of war is not to die for your nation, but to have the other guy get killed for his. Well, for the Russians, the problem is that they don't want that either. And once again, every turn when THD has been proposed as an answer, and actually, unfortunately, is becoming more and more the only answer, Anki has refused to enact it. Because still in his fucking mind, he wants to have that thing. And it's logical on a purely imperialistic Russian vision, Ukraine is needed. Not much because they are like some kind of elves of shit, but simply because you have the Black Sea access and you need this population to be there and, grow and be exactly what you need from them. And the imperial thought that Russians have always had towards Ukraine has not been we're going to kill them to the last. That's why Holodomor is such a absolutely warped view on reality. But I digress. This is something completely different. Bottom line is the following: a lot of people are failing to see, the bear in the room. Let's say it like this. And until that thing's changed, that things is changed, then a lot of the people on the Ukrainian side are not going to see the light of truth, and we are going to have all this Zrada Peremoga roller coaster, and at the end of the day, it's going to be wilder and wilder. Now we have 10 troops. Tomorrow we're going to have Iranians, and after tomorrow Chinese. And then after tomorrow, Martians. So at the end of the day, the space was about taking both real data, accurate data, and it can be perfectly from the faggots that Geo confirmed. But most of the time, what it's going to be is about trying to see what's behind what's being announced and what you see. And also why things are happening. But not limit yourself to the day-to-day threat, because that's going to be the worst. That's how you're going to lose sight of the real deal. And also, of course, as I said, a lot of trends. Losses are one thing, but trending is the most important part. Thank you very much, guys. I'm not going to be taking any kind of questions today because it's part of just spontaneous space. We're gonna have an actual real space probably on Wednesday when I'm going to point out how the Russian leadership and the military leadership has gone back to what it wanted to do in 2022. And is, as I said, using salami tactics now that I think the Ukrainian defenses are battered enough for them to enact those piecemeal attacks, which are right now, especially in Pokrovsk and in Ugledar, Southern Donetsk, are yielding enormous results. As I said, the wall in Ugledar makes almost sure that Ukrainians are going to approach any kind of counteroffensive in Zaporozhye in a completely different way. And also it means a shorter perimeter to bomb for the Russians, and also to, a larger backfield to concentrate their troops from. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice day, and see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.